Welcome to our online worship service. I thank you for joining us here this morning. My name is Jessica Olenjinsky.
And I'm Pastor Daniel Wilt.
We're happy to have you here today. We have a few announcements. We want to let you know that if you have any needs, please contact the church. We are here to help. And we know as things go on, things can pile up or creep up. And we are here to help you, and we want to help you. So please reach out and let us know.
Absolutely. And one of the ways that we have been helping to meet needs is any financial needs or resource needs that we have been receiving here at the church and through our connections. We are members of the Lewisburg Council of Churches, which has a fund that we contribute to that goes to help people who are in need during this time. We have contributed to the Community Zone, which has a program called Getting Ahead in the Valley that is also meeting immediate needs. We've made donations to the United Way, supported the Donald Heater Center, who are all of those organizations are helping to meet needs right now. And so we want to thank you for your gifts and your contributions, because those gifts and contributions have gone to continue to support the ministry that we are doing here, but also to these partners that we have here in our community. And so we just want to thank you for those gifts and remind you that if you do want to continue on giving, you can do so by mailing your offerings here to 42 South 4th Street. You can go online to our website, stpaulslewisburg.org, and there will be a button that says Give Here, and so you'll just click on that and follow along. Or you can text by texting your offering amount to 84321, and it'll give you some steps to follow to make that happen. Our missional partner for this quarter is Wesley Forest Camp and Retreat Ministry Center in Wykert, Pennsylvania here. And so we just want to let you know that this week they announced that summer camp programs are being postponed and canceled for the entire summer. And so they rely heavily on summer camp to sustain their ministry up there. And so we're grateful that they are a ministry partner with us that we've been fed by. Our youth and our kids go up there and love it. I personally have been up there several times, and a lot of people in this area have gone up there for education days. And so we're grateful that they open that up for our community. And so we want to support them for the work that they're doing. And so if you can give to missions, please think about giving in our missions category this day.
Thank you. Our church schedule is we're going to be continuing on with our church online until at least through the month of June.
Yep.
And we'll continually to reevaluate as things change. Also starting in the month of June, though, we're going to try some home churches. If you're interested in being part of a home church, please contact the church office, and we will help set that up and facilitate that.
Yep.
So we're looking forward to that. And of course, we're always looking forward to when we can come back and be together.
Yes. And though we are looking forward to when we can come back and be together, we know that wherever we are, God finds us in our homes, in our apartments, in our places that we are watching this. Maybe you are making a car trip and you are watching this on your phone. Hopefully you're not the driver who's watching it, but maybe you're listening along as somebody in the car is watching it. Wherever you are, just know that the community of hope that we have here at St. Paul's is with you and connected to you during this time. And so what we want to do is, wherever you are, we hope that you have a candle nearby. If you don't have a candle, maybe what you can do is set aside something specific that just draws your attention, that we know that you at times need to wander away when we're talking, and that your mind just needs to drift. Have something that your eyes can go to that will point you back to God and what God is doing in your life. And so for us, it's a candle here. So take your candle and light it. And as you do, take a few deep breaths as we prepare for worship together. Let us breathe and prepare ourselves this day. Now that we are prepared for worship, let us join together as we sing our first song, Faith of Our Fathers. The words will be on the screen, but if you have a hymnal at home, we hope that you'll follow along in that as well. Let us join together as we sing Faith of Our Fathers.
Let us now take this time to pray. Dear God, thank you so much for everything that you do for us each and every day. When we wake up to the birds singing, when we see our beautiful skies transitioning from clouds to sun, back and forth, sometimes constantly throughout the day. We can feel your winds. We can feel all of nature around us. Let us remember you through that. Let us see you moving through our lives and keeping us safe and protected. And even though some days we feel like we're not safe or protected, we know that deep in our hearts, you are always there, and you will not give us more than we can handle. That we will be able to face whatever it is, sometimes not easily, not happily, but we can face anything through you, with you behind us, beside us, and comforting us. I ask you to lead us today through this time of worship, that you will open our hearts, our minds to the message, that we will look at the question and think about our answer. Do we want to be well? Do we want to be better? Do we want to be healed? Let us think about that. Let us take it throughout our week and be able to talk to others. Think about it when we see others and be sympathetic about it to others and to ourselves, who we can sometimes be the hardest on. I just ask you to bless and watch us and take care of us throughout this day as we hear your word. And let us all now join together in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. This morning we are continuing on in our sermon series, Questions Jesus Asked. And it's actually our last week looking at the different questions that Jesus asked. And so we are grateful for the journey that you have all made with us as we continue to explore and wrestle with different things. And we look forward to next week as we explore Pentecost. Today we are asking the last question, and I think potentially the most powerful question Jesus ever asked another individual. And that question he asked was, do you want to be well? And so today we have a special scripture reader joining us this morning from a video, and she will be reading John chapter 5, verses 1 through 15. Let us hear the word of God together.
Hi, this is Jeannie Hafer. Today I'm reading from the Gospel of John chapter 5, verses 1 to 15. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath, and so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick up your mat and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well.
So, as we have now heard the scripture, we want to take some time and just kind of like walk through it and highlight anything that kind of stood out to us. So, the first thing that we need to know is that Jesus went up to Jerusalem and he's here for a Jewish festival. And so, this is a very common time. And we also have to understand that this is early on in Jesus' ministry. And so, he would have ventured on down into here, and he goes to this healing pool, this place to where it's long been held that people come here for ritual cleaning and ritual purity, and that they would be healed. And our person that we are reading about today, according to footnotes and other stories, has been here for 38 years, here in verse 5. And so he's been unable to walk. He's been paralyzed, and so he's been coming. This has been part of who he is. It's his identity. Partly that we're going through. And so that's one of the things that stood out to me, is just like how long this has been occurring, and just, you know, he's been there, and the big thing that he pushes against is that he didn't have like no one to help him get in. And so those two things, we're going to talk a little bit more, but before we dive a little bit deeper into them, Jess, anything stand out to you in this passage you want to highlight first?
Yeah, I like how John gives a lot of details sometimes to his stories. And he has Jesus entering, coming back to Jerusalem they don't mention what the festival is, but some festival. And he enters through the sheep gate. And this is the gate where they would have brought in the sheep, but animal sacrifices came through this gate. And this pools, which were like two large pools with fancy veranda porches all around them. And they were side by side together, and all kinds of people, invalids, people who were blind, anybody who needed healing would go and wait for the water to stir. And this, in the King James Version, it talks about an angel coming down and stirring the waters. These pools have actually been found. They've been archaeologically dug up.
Yep.
So they are a real thing, and there is many things that support that this was a common practice at this time, and that the water did do that and people were waiting to get in. And there sits this guy, and this was his job. He lived off of, people would also go to help them, people at times, so this was a place of begging. And at that time period, begging was a career.
Yeah.
In some places still, unfortunately, people have been known to hurt themselves to actually do this as a career, which is a strange concept. But and he did this for, like we said, 38 years. So he had his mat probably wasn't like a yoga mat that was it could have even been a wooden mat that he would have had. It would have been substantial. And I think that's kind of important to think about as the story goes on. He had a spot that he kept for 38 years. That was his spot. And also that he clearly had no family or friends who could help him. So this would have been a pretty bleak life.
Yeah.
That you just went and sat by this, you were there, every day for 38 years, waiting, and you had no family, no friends to help you. So he really didn't have a chance, probably ever, to make it into that water. Because as the theory or the story goes, the earlier, sometimes only the first person was healed, or the first few people.
Yeah.
So getting to it late, you didn't get healed. So, and then in walks Jesus.
Yeah.
And, Jesus went and picked him. He didn't say sir, could you help me? He didn't ask for anything. He didn't seek Jesus out. A matter of fact, I don't think, in my reading of it, I feel like I don't think he would, maybe he was never searching people out at this point. He was just, complacent with his place in life. And after that period of time, you could see that happening.
Well, yeah, and I think that, you know, the idea of 38 years, he's had this mindset and this livelihood. And he does say, after Jesus asks him the question, do you want to get well? And he says, I have no one to help me. And so, like, we want to show pity on that person, but also, like, the other thing, so I worked at Burger King, and one of the things I've learned about Burger King when I work there is you have a group of regulars that come in. And so we had Joe and John and Dave and Betty, and you know, they would come in and they would just sit at a table, whether they knew each other or not, whether they, you know, they would sit near, they would sit far, but they always came in, and they built this community over my 6.5 years there, to where, though they had nothing in common, other than they were alone, they didn't have family in the area, they didn't have a spouse anymore, but they had a spot that they wanted to go to. And so, like, this understanding of, for 38 years, he's been coming to this spot. And so, though he didn't have, you know, friends or family, he did have some form of a community, but that this community that he had wasn't deep enough to be able to walk with him through this tough time of, I don't have anyone who will help me. Because we also have to be, you know, mindful. The other people who are there and are regularly there are the other invalids and the other people who are unable to
Had the same goal.
Yeah, they're all trying to do this, and so it's this hard thing. And I think of those who, you know, they hurt themselves as a means to continue on you know, benefiting from a system.
Right.
And you know, that happens. It's a rarity, but it is a thing. The problem is, for him, this was his way of life. For 38 years in this time, there wasn't a welfare system. There wasn't a, you know, a social security system. Mm-hmm. It was, you had to work or you had to beg. And so his job became begging for money, showing the sadness of this. And I just think Jesus coming to him and saying, do you want to be well, is asking him, really, do you want your entire life to be different?
Yeah.
Do you want everything you know right now to be so different? And we're going to explore that whenever we reflect it back onto us.
Yeah, and John set him up with many attributes, many negative attributes. I mean, John doesn't, I feel like, want him, he's not certainly a hero in the story. Mm-hmm. I mean, he is, you know, he's an older gentleman, he's dependent, he's a complainer, he's a blamer, he's a sinner, he's ungrateful and disloyal, and he's, you know, unrepentant. So when you go through the whole story, you know, you see all of these different attributes each throughout.
Yeah.
And John makes it very clear, you know, that he still got a miracle.
Yeah.
And what is amazing is Jesus not only sought him out, healed him, but came back and found him later.
Yeah.
And talked to him again and, you know, gave him instruction.
Yeah, and I do want to highlight the instruction part because if there's one part of this passage that I wrestle with, it's when Jesus looks at him in the temple, and so this is verse 14. See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. And so, one, if we take Jesus literally in that moment, the something worse that may happen, you know, in that time and in that culture, it was not uncommon for people to believe that bad things happen to you because of the sin you performed or the sin in your life, whether that was your sin or the sin of your ancestors. And so you have that struggle. We can also take it pretty literally in that Jesus is referring to, you know, eternal consequences, you know, stop sinning or something worse.
You'll go to hell.
Yeah, you know, along those lines. But I also think, like, this whole understanding of Jesus might be talking about, he could be talking about hell. He could be talking about illness. Though I don't believe the illness one. The hell one, you know, we can talk about more, but not for today's video. But, like, I also wonder if it's that, will he revert, you know, something bad? Like, a life with Jesus is supposed to point us to being, you know, you listed all these things. He was ungrateful, he was uncommitted, he was disloyal, all of those things. You know, a life with Christ puts us to be more grateful for what we have, even if it's very little. And, you know, we have a life of gratitude and a life of praise and a life of, you know, one of the things that I think is hard for us in this church season is we can't be in our community. Even if we were to open the doors tomorrow, we still can't be in our church community because we would have to be sectioned and fractioned. And we have members of our congregation who just don't feel ready to get back together. And that's one of the conversations we have of, we want everyone to be well, but also we do want to get back together because we know that community, and so we walk this tightrope, and I think we walk this tightrope in a lot of other ways. That sin, it's not that just because you sin, bad things are going to happen, but when you choose sin over choosing to be well, you're going to feel that in your life, and it's eventually going to catch up with you to where you're going to think, I'm unhappy. I'm not, and I just think of moments in my life to where I'm not doing well spiritually, and I'm choosing to do things my own way rather than just be obedient. Just looking at those and seeing how downtrodden I was, and I'm not going to say I battled depression, but battled very dark periods of my life.
It is, and it's. I mean, this is a big thing, the healing, and that he was an invalid. But with Jesus, it's very similar to when the rich man approached Jesus and asked how he could be a follower, and Jesus told him to give everything up, and he was like,
I just can't do that.
Hard pass, and but I will say that's one thing that this guy did. I mean, he got up. And of course, in true Jesus fashion, I often think that when he does miracles, he gives us so much more than we even think we need. So this man who couldn't walk for 38 years was able to stand immediately, almost spring up, and pick up this wooden, it would be almost like a wooden pallet, and carry it. So think of all, how weak you get just when you're sick for a week. You get weak.
Well, or whenever you've been sitting for even if you're watching a 3-hour movie and you stand up and you're like, oh, my knees are cracking, my bones hurt.
When I walked from over there to here today, I actually commented on that.
And so you have that going on to where okay, if you have not moved, if you have not used these things, it's a problem. And so for 38 years, snap, Jesus, does this. And I did want to, talk about that for a moment, the understanding. Specifically when we turn it towards ourselves, whenever Jesus asked that question, do you want to be well? So for many of us, we don't have debilitating disease or issues that, we're looking for a miracle cure to where, of a physical ailment. But we do have things that we struggle with and that we don't want to be well. I think of, and I'm going to maybe speak for both of us. Jess and I can be we can be complainers about certain things. And so we can go down that dark road. We can be sarcastic. We can be, those sorts of things. But we can also, for me, there's just mornings that, I know if I get up, take the dog for a walk, it would be great because my body gets moving. You feel it. The days that you exercise, you feel it a lot more. This week has been Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, and Jess walked in and, she literally said, you look exhausted. And I'm like, I am exhausted. And so we have to have that understanding of, we know what it is to be well. We know what it is, but we at times choose to not live in that wellness and instead live in, last night I had pizza rolls for dinner. The best nutritional meal? No.
No.
Was it very, very quick and easy to make because I was in meetings from 7 until 9:30? Yes. And so that's why we did it. But if I ate pizza rolls every night of my life, I will not be preaching much longer. And so that whole understanding of part of this, do you want to be well, is a common sense thing. But then the other part of it is this man couldn't just snap out of it. This man just couldn't take care of himself because he's dealing with a big issue. And at times in our lives, we're dealing with a big issue. But whether our issue is a temporal, I just like sarcasm and being bitter and complaining on Facebook about how our political leaders, whether on either side, are nightmares. We have that. We just want to sit with that. Or we have this, lifelong, debilitating issue that we're battling, physical or mental. Jesus is this answer, and Jesus can provide this way out for us. And whenever Jesus says, pick up your mat and walk, it says that at once the man was cured.
Yeah.
And I think for us as Christians, we operate with that word at once, that when we pray for something or when we, commit ourselves over to Jesus, that we think, why did I not why did I not experience? And I think I used this in one of our devotionals this week in our emails is, I walked into a gym once. I didn't walk out thin. It takes work for us to do this. And so, but we as Christians, we need to believe in miracles still. I wholeheartedly believe that. If we don't believe God can show up in a moment and change our world drastically like that, that's a little sad for me, because I think that God can show up and burst forth. But we as followers of Jesus aren't just looking for the extraordinary. We're looking for God to show up in the ordinary, in the mundane, and even in the long term, to where it's, I'm committing now that I want to be a more positive person. Tomorrow I'm still going to wake up and complain that I don't want to take the dog for a walk. But in 5 months from now, maybe I won't wake up complaining. I'll wake up saying, this is just part of who I am. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. We need to keep that tension in ourselves. Okay. The other thing I also wanted to highlight about this is the man's very clear. I have no one to help me. And so the thing I want to highlight with that is, as we sit there and we think, so the first question, do you want to get well? I would challenge you. And if you're watching this with your family, maybe talk about that question. Do you want to be well? The question is, what do you need to be made well from? And so, for me, it's my impatience at times. And, I need to commit myself to that. And I need to commit myself to making better, dietary and health choices, especially if this is going to go on any longer than it is. And so, making those commitments and saying, Jesus, I want to be well, but also putting in the work to do it. But then also ask that question of, he says, I have no one to help me. We have people. I'm grateful for Jess as a friend and a person in the church. I'm grateful for, other friends that surround me and text me and call me. I'm grateful for my family that's there. I think one of the reasons that we suffer for so long is because we think we have no one there to help us, but that we have people that we can turn to.
Right.
But it also requires us to lay down that pride and letting people see us vulnerable and weak, and that we admit that there is something that we need to change, rather than what I typically do is like, I want to be less sarcastic, and then continue on being sarcastic completely. You will hear more sarcasm later on from me. Maybe not today, though. So yeah, those are a lot of my thoughts. Sorry for just vomiting at you. But I think we need to ask ourselves, what do we need to be made well from? Who's in our corner? And if we're struggling to find somebody who's in our corner, I hope if you're watching this and you have not been connected, that that we here would love to build that relationship and would love to build that connection with you, because I truly believe that we have a community of people who want to inspire hope and inspire life-giving words into each and every person. And so think of those people. But even when you don't think of people, Jess said this in her prayer, God doesn't give us anything more than that we can bear. And I'm grateful that she continued on and said, without God. With God, we will never have more than we can bear. And so even when we feel that people are failing us, I hope we know that we have a God who shows up. And that Jesus showed up at this pool, and the man wasn't waving, saying, Jesus, look at me, do this. As Jess said, Jesus approached the man, met the man, and brought healing to his life. And so I think a very important, even if you have a great community around you, Jesus needs to be a part of that community, and Jesus needs to do this. And I think that you will start to see healing and redemption come into your life as a result of that. Anything you want to highlight? Anything else?
Not in the first 7, maybe when we turn more to the Pharisees part.
Yeah, then let's transition.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So he picks up his mat, he goes out, he walks, and this is such an unfortunate time, and I feel, unfortunately, this happens today. There are people who, at this time, and they were probably of the Pharisees group. They chose to be almost like Sabbath police.
Yeah.
So the Sabbath is supposed to be a day of rest. I mean, in the Old Testament, it really, makes it a day of just reflection and that. And unfortunately, the Pharisees and rabbinical law started to make it more intense. They started to list things that you could do, things that you couldn't do, and you were allowed to carry someone else on a mat, but you couldn't carry your own mat.
Yeah.
And there was that. And then not only did they have all these intricate laws and made it harder and harder and harder, but they also then had these people who would go out and police and try and find people doing things wrong and corner them. So this man was stopped by these people, and why are you carrying your own mat? And here's a man who hasn't walked for 38 years,
yeah.
and he's caught, we don't know how long, but say 10 minutes later, and he's probably like, seriously, I just walked for the first time. And unfortunately, he doesn't handle it great. He immediately is like, I don't know, some guy over there told me I could pick it up and walk. And they have continued to question and continue to question. And I just kind of thought that was amazing. And I kind of think that I'm sure it was part of Jesus' big plan that in his father's original, in his law, originally set down, in the beginning, it was to observe the Sabbath, to make it a holy day,
yeah.
to be a time, not to be a time of nitpicking rules that separate you
and
from
I think,
God.
And I think we definitely fall into that trap today
Yes.
of, we want people who dress a certain way, talk a certain way, sound a certain way, sit in a certain place. We all have those things that we fall prey to, and we all have our preferences. I can at times be nitpicky about certain things that I want to see happen in the church world or on Sunday morning. And so I understand partially what they're doing, but I also think like the thing I kind of took away from that section was, and I've said this a lot, and I hope you all take this as positively as I can, like ministry would be a whole lot easier if there weren't people. Life would be a whole lot easier if there weren't people. Now, obviously, whenever I say that, I want the people I want.
Yes.
But, because then there's some people who, they just
People
get on
who don't
you.
think like you.
Yes. Or even people who just can't, have this broader worldview. But, I think one of the reasons that we can be sarcastic and that we can be impatient and that we can do this is because we're dealing with other people. And it's either I do sarcasm or I go off on this person. So I have to, here's the choices I have. And so we'll choose sarcasm rather than practicing full out impatience. Or it's our coping mechanism, because it's either we're going to be sarcastic about the world happening around us, or we're going to sit at home and cry ourselves to sleep because we just can't handle it. And so for these people, the Jewish leaders that are coming along, they're coming and they could have been a hindrance to this man enjoying his first day walking and doing this. Yeah. And we're not really given credence onto whether he was happier or sadder as a result of working with the Pharisees. But I just think, if it were me,
right,
I was just healed. I'm carrying my mat because this man who healed me, obviously a guy who can do powerful things,
right,
says, all right, go take your mat and get going. I'm going to take my mat and I'm going to get going. And so you do that. You run into these people who have some power in the culture of that day, and they're reprimanding the man. I would feel down. I'm celebrating this goodness, and these people are just trying to bring me down. And so, I think that's important.
Also, you kind of are confused where, maybe he really didn't understand. Maybe he would have been a Jewish man, but yet he didn't recognize Jesus as a Messiah-like
figure,
or even a prophetic figure.
Yeah.
He just said it was a man over there. And he wasn't able to defend it, and yet Jesus found him later in the temple. So it's kind of back and forth in my mind how religious, how good of a follower this man was.
Yeah, and
I mean, and how could he? He couldn't go to church for 38 years because
yeah, not
how he
unless
would have
people
got
brought
there.
him. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, unless people. But we also, we have that recognition of no one's really there to help him in
Right.
this moment. But yeah, but then you talk about Jesus does go back to the temple, and Jesus finds him in the temple,
Yes.
and I think like just that verification for the man, like that reminder of see you are well again, and just that, and I think. I don't know about you, but have you ever had like bad times, then you have like a good day and you're waiting for it. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're like, this won't sustain itself.
Yeah.
Something bad's about to happen. And I think, I don't know if the man was like that, but I think in our lives we can have that sort of buy-in of, I don't deserve good things. I don't deserve to have nice things. I don't deserve, good things coming to me. And so Jesus is like, I think partly reassuring, see you are well again. Remember that. See, like hold on to that, but also like, and that's how Jesus is. He's going to affirm, but then he's also going to challenge you to do a little bit more. Like, don't go back to sin. Don't choose to go back to the way that was before. Not that I think the man will become, paralyzed again and unable to move, but instead, make sure you stay in this new life that you have that Jesus has brought him. So yeah, before we do a quick wrap up, anything else you want to highlight from the passage?
Well, just also that or it wasn't mentioned, maybe because John didn't do that, but he never said thank you.
Yeah.
He was never really appreciative in this. And we've seen that before with people who receive, miracles from God and have been healed. And, like the lepers, they didn't all thank you.
Yeah.
But, you see that throughout that. And I was like, even when Jesus came back and found him and he said, see, I felt like the man should have been like, thank you. And also, usually when Jesus healed people, especially in the beginning of his ministry at this time, he's like, don't tell anyone. And he never said that to this guy.
Yeah.
And so the guy did say,
Yeah.
who it was. It was him.
Yeah.
But yet other people who'd been told not to tell and
went out and told.
told. And yet, it's an interesting story because do you like the guy? Do you not like the guy? Do you like the guy? Do you not like the guy throughout this?
Yeah, I think
I
it's an
go
interesting
back and
read,
forth,
yeah.
which I think in itself is an important message because, we see people throughout our whole life and you're like, I kind of like them, but then they do this one thing that drives me crazy. And, Jesus doesn't look at that. I mean, that's not what he judges on is, that one thing or 10 things that can drive him crazy. He loves us no matter what. And I think of even just myself, I do things every day that I'm sure drive Jesus crazy. And he still loves me. I feel that. And, he made that clear to this guy also, and even with a warning though.
Yeah.
But he still chose him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we've thrown a lot out.
Yeah.
We've dissected a passage. I've talked a lot, Jess talked a lot. But we want to also make sure that we're giving you time to sit with these questions, and we're not always great at giving you that time. And so, again, the questions that we're highlighting, first, do you want to be well? And I think that's a question that you have to, there's things that I'm sure we could all list off real quick that we want to answer. But truly ask yourself that question. Do you want to be well, or do you really want to sit? Because when Jesus asked that question, that means you have to change, your complete understanding of how you're going to live your life in that. I think in the season of, we see divisive posts on Facebook or in the news, I want to ask people who do that. And, sometimes I can fall into that trap of, do you want to be well? If so, do you think yelling on Facebook is going to give it to you?
Right.
Do you think that's going to be the thing that does it? So ask that question, and maybe even if you have a piece of paper, write down, what are those areas of my life that I need to recommit to God, and that just invite Jesus to come into that situation and bring healing to it, is a big part of that. The counter of that is also, for me, I can be harsh on society, I can be harsh on the church, I can be harsh on those things. But to make that a little broader question, do I want society to really be well? And if so, am I gonna partner with Jesus to bring healing into that? And so
You're going to love people who aren't perfect.
yeah, and I think that's yeah, because you're going to meet people
Yeah.
who are imperfect and people who also need that healing
Yeah.
along the way. And so that's kind of my big takeaway of that is I have to ask myself, do I really really want to be well, and do I want to see the world around us be made well as well? And if so, what am I doing to bring Jesus into my life, to bring Jesus into those situations? And so those are the questions I want to sit with. As I walk away, and those are the questions I want you to sit with. Is anything else you want to add?
No.
Perfect. So what we want to do is we want to give you time to reflect on that. And so we're going to sing our next song, which is Through It All. And so as we hear the music playing over, maybe you want to sing along with that, but in the back of your mind, keep those two questions kind of moving through you, and in an attitude of prayer, just recommit those areas of your life that you want to give over to Jesus so that you can experience healing. Let us sing and participate in prayer as we hear the words hear the music to Through It All.
I want to thank you for taking your time during this Memorial Day weekend. We want to highlight that it is Memorial Day weekend and thank all of those who have given service to our country and who are presently serving our country through the armed forces, and say our thank you to all of them and to their families. And I want to thank you for taking time out this morning to join us. And each Sunday morning, or whenever you watch this throughout the week, I thank you for that. I want to give you a blessing of peace and love, and to be well through this time and this week. I just thank you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good
great
week.
week.